Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And the 2032 season has just ended for Oakland with a loss in the American League Division Series to the Kansas City Royals, who had the best record in baseball this year. Interestingly, when we look at the playoff tree, every division series was decided in a fifth game, 3-2, and every division series was won by the team with home field advantage that had a first round bye. So the Royals will be facing off against the Yankees in the ALCS, and the Rockies will be facing off against the Pirates in the NLCS. And as we've talked about a lot in previous episodes, my expectation is that this offseason is going to be a very significant one with a lot of turnover for these Oakland A's. We're going to be losing a lot of higher paid, more proven veterans, and probably going to be relying more on our farm system to fill in some of the gaps next season. This team has been in the playoffs 3 out of the last 4 years, which is positive. But this roster is likely to be somewhat weaker and certainly less proven next year than it is as of today on October 17th, 2032. In our next episode, we'll do our annual review of our roster and really start planning for the off-season in earnest. Got a few things that we want to cover in this episode, though, before we get to that. The first thing we're going to spend a little more extra time on right now is the International Amateur Free Agent Pool. We've typically waited until the month of January to dig in deeper on that over the past few years, but given that our team was eliminated from the playoffs just a couple days ago, and the International Free Agent Showcase was today, even though we've got low or very low scouting accuracy on everybody, we'll kind of highlight for our worldwide scouting department some of the guys that might be the most interesting players we'll be pursuing in about 3 months. Odds are we'll have some different thoughts on their floors and their ceilings and their capabilities as we get better scouting reports. But here on day one of what will be around a 3-month scouting period before we have to start making some decisions, there's certainly 4 pitchers who stand out, at least according to our scout, in terms of potential. Reliever Agostino Ruggiero looks like he could be potentially a useful major league arm. Don't think there's an exceptional ceiling with him right now. And then there's 3 players that are higher ceiling according to our scout, who are all listed as starters. Juan Varela, 16-year-old out of Venezuela, looks like a marginal prospect at best. He's already fragile physically, has some negative personality characteristics, and question whether that third pitch of his, whether it's a fastball or a sinker, is really going to be a competent major league pitch when all is said and done. Alvaro Celis, Coffin, a guy who at least has potential for a 4-pitch arsenal, although we're not expecting any of his pitches to be particularly proficient, but think he could have average stuff plus movement and acceptable control. But although the movement on his pitches is honestly exceptional for a 16-year-old, his stuff and his control both are very unproven. And the highest rated pitching prospect is Jorge Murillo, a 17-year-old out of the Dominican. He's going to be dependent again on getting to 3 pitches to have a chance at being an effective starter. I think his stuff, his movement, and his control could all be a bit above average if they fully develop. I think he's probably the most interesting of the pitching prospects, and he happens to be looking for less money than Celis or Varela. Could certainly see him being in the mix for us, but I would tend to think that this may be a IAFA pool where we focus a little more on position players, at least based on this very cursory and ill-informed review of the potential prospects. And before we get into the position player prospects, one other reason we may be a little less aggressive with pitchers this year is that our big investment in scouting, and particularly international scouting, and also hiring a scout who's excellent with international players, has paid off for us once again. We've come up with a really, we think, high ceiling starting pitching prospect that we have discovered over the last couple of months at this point. Alejandro Ramos out of Venezuela, a guy that is only a 3-pitch guy like some of those other pitchers that we were talking about, but we think the potential high end of his pitches is borderline exceptional, and think that he could be a guy with outstanding stuff, with plus movement, plus control. Already throws in the low to mid 90s, plus stamina, plus at holding on runners. Honestly, view him as a higher end pitching prospect than any of the IAFA guys that we just mentioned. So the fact that he was a pretty high end potential scouting discovery of ours just yesterday does make me, on the margin, perhaps a little more hopeful that we'll be able to go with position players, particularly given the way that IAFA pitching pool looks right now. In turning to those position players, you can see we've got a pretty good-sized list of players with 3.5-star or higher potential. We tend to think as we get to know these guys a little bit better, perhaps won't be quite as a high-end prospect pool as we think it is right now. Similar to the pitchers, we've got very low or low scouting accuracy on everybody. We are going to have the full maximum $5.7 million to spend, so we should be able to get just about any single player that we want. We'll take a quick look at the five-star potential players, and certainly we'll be spending some more time in the IAFA pool in the coming episodes as we get closer to decision time. But again, wanted to give a initial preview of some of the guys who look like they might be the highest end prospects. Center fielder Sergio Galindo looks more like a corner outfielder, quite honestly, with his ratings. Not a lot of speed, not a great base runner, not a good bunter. Does have high work ethic. He is durable. And most importantly, the bat is potentially pretty high end. Could be a little bit above average in everything with exceptional power. But he has got a long way to go. He is a very raw prospect in pretty much every metric around. But the left-handed hitter maybe will be looking a little more interesting as we get to know him a little bit better. Second baseman Mauricio Ibarra. Not really an infielder with that profile. He is 6'4", so he could probably be a first baseman. But you're going to be playing him for his bat, certainly. Got a little bit of speed, some pretty positive personality traits, although he's not that smart. And we think his contact, gap power, and power could all be well above average to borderline excellent. And think he could, when all is said and done, have an average major league eye. Another center fielder is Vicente Laguna out of the Dominican. Pretty well-balanced prospect, a guy that we think could be above average at everything if he completely develops. Does have a little bit of speed, high leadership, decent outfield range, although what he does with the balls that he gets to and how well he is at getting them back into the infield to make plays seem like they will be questions for him as he matures through his career. An infielder, Fabrizio Moneghetti, shortstop out of Venezuela. High work ethic, like the potential glove, and think he could have exceptional power, really good gap power with decent speed. Could be plus contact, not going to necessarily draw a ton of walks, a little more raw in terms of his current abilities than some of the other guys, but still an interesting prospect. And the last of the 5-star potential prospects right now is Jorge Orellana, Nacogdoches. High work ethic, solid range, arm and error rating not exceptional, decent speed, solid bunter. Contact looks like it could be well above average, along with his gap power. We think his power could be absolutely exceptional, and think his eye could be decent. On first glance, I'd have to say that Orellana is probably the most interesting prospect to me. He's got a lot of growth that's going to need to take place. He does have that high work ethic, but certainly could be an absolutely exceptional home run hitter with good contact and a fair amount of extra base hits if all goes well. But a lot is going to need to go well for him to get to that point. So if you've got any initial thoughts on these players, always helpful for me to hear what people are thinking. And as I said, we'll be digging in deeper on many of these guys in the coming episodes as we get closer to mid-January and the signing period start for the 2033 crop of international amateur free agents. So with that early preview of some future prospects completed, we'll take a look at some interesting prospects that we've looked at over the years. Byron Dervish is a player we considered in the first IAFA period 7.5 years ago at this point. He's listed as the number 46 prospect in baseball, but he's 24 years old now, and he's never made it above AA ball. Hit 209 this year, did have 26 homers, but he has struck out over 200 times each of the past 3 seasons. Love some of his personality traits and still think he's got exceptional power, but at this point is a 24-year-old who's still has never even played in AAA. Probably not the highest end prospect in the world. Bobby Vermillion was liked by some of our worldwide scouting department when we looked at this past draft. He ended up going 29th overall. We picked, I believe it was 22nd, so we had an opportunity at him. Went in a different direction with the young pitcher Amari Raphael. Vermillion, we think he's got potential for exceptional power and a great eye. The question is just making contact and avoiding strikeouts. And he did end up getting signed by the Blue Jays organization, but it was not in time for him to actually play this year. Didn't sign until the beginning of September, so perhaps a lost opportunity there for Vermillion to supercharge his development a little bit. Jesus de la Campa, shortstop, listed as the number 27 prospect in baseball. Split the year between AA and AAA in the Royals organization and did make his major league debut this year, where he hit 271 and 48 at-bats at the end of the year. Love the range, love the speed, really like the personality. Think he's going to be a pretty proficient contact hitter, but not going to draw a ton of walks and certainly not going to hit very many home runs, but think he could still be a pretty useful major league player. David Orta was a guy we considered in the second IAFA period back in 2026, listed as the number 51 prospect in baseball. Really weird usage by the Reds organization this year. They had him up in the majors at the end of 2031. He was not particularly proficient, admittedly, going 3 for 60, but they dropped him all the way back to high A ball this year. And he didn't even hit 200 in high A ball. Would have thought, though, granted, he only hit a $156 in high A ball a year ago, but he did get some experience in AAA in the majors, given that he's now 23 years old. Might have expected him to get some AA action this year, but still struggling to get out of high A ball. The glove is not a question with him. The bat, though, is becoming a very significant question at 23 years old. Daniel Campos, a center fielder, international free agent signing from back in 2028. Split the year between A and AA in the Brewers organization. Was a average player in A, was pretty unproductive in AA with 1 homer in 69 at-bats and a 29 WRC plus. Like his speed, although he was only 1 for 3 stealing in AA. Decent defensive outfielder. I think the bat could still be interesting. Only 21 years old. Going to have to really start developing that power, but could have a pretty interesting contact and power combination if he reaches his full potential. And then Greg Cuff is a guy who was picked 4th overall in this draft in 2032 out of Ohio State. Also a guy that we looked at in the 2029 draft, where he went unsigned after being drafted high. Hit .218 in rookie ball this year with 4 homers and 119 ribbies. Was an average rookie ball kind of player, but honestly, for a 4th overall pick who's going to be 22 years old a month from today, probably would have hoped, if I was the Diamondbacks organization, for a bit more productivity at the rookie level, playing primarily against guys who are just out of high school. Turning to some pitchers, Jesus Escobar is a starting pitcher who was an international free agent just about a year and a half ago. Spent another year in rookie ball for the Pirates, 3-4 with a 4.19 ERA. Still think he could be a pretty interesting major leaguer. He's considered the 50th best prospect in baseball. Jeremy Martin, guy who went 9th overall in 2028 out of Indiana. Developing into a good, solid major league starter, 9-11 this year, 4.50 ERA. So not as effective as he was in 2031, but at this point he is a good, solid major league pitcher heading into arbitration eligible years, looking to be making about $3 million next year. I'm guessing the demands for him in a trade are going to be pretty high, and given that we're in the postseason right now, we can't even see what it might take to bring a guy like that on board. Kevin Patterson, out of California, went 12th overall in the draft about 15 months ago. Made it all the way up to AAA this year, where he was 5-9 with an ERA of over 6. Looking at his profile, would certainly expect that he'll be in the majors at some point next year. Connor Fister is a guy who was picked 15th overall out of Georgia Tech in 2029. We kind of thought he was going to be a guy in the majors. Weird usage, certainly, by the Nationals organization. Had him down in rookie ball this year to start the year, where he was 2-2 with a 3.79 ERA. Actually had a slightly lower ERA in A-ball, and then he made it back to AAA towards the end of the year. Certainly would expect, given that he's going to be 25 years old before next season starts, that we will be seeing him in the majors next year. Alan Walling, a guy out of the University of Southern Indiana, has become a pretty solid major league starter for the Angels. 9-11 this year with a 3.78 ERA, a 2.9 WAR. We were always a little concerned about his lack of velocity when we had the opportunity to pick him up several years ago, but he seems like he has overcome that pretty well and is a solid, respectable major league pitcher, although I don't think he's ever going to be a star. Juan Sanabria, international free agent from that first class in 2025, pitched 1 game in the majors this year, allowed 2 runs, 2 hits, including a homer in 1 inning pitched. So not a particularly successful 2032 at the major league level for him. Looks, with his profile, like he is most likely a guy at the major league level. Nothing special. And speaking of nothing special, Cruz Schoolcraft, who was a very high draft pick of ours several years ago, looks like he's been waived recently by Atlanta, ended up in the Chicago organization. Pitched 12 games at the major league level this year with a brutal 12.84 ERA. Allowed 7 home runs in 16 walks in just 20 and a third innings. 2.46 whip. Just a brutal performance. The control has always been an issue for him. He was a potential two-way guy when we picked him up, but his bat has not really developed much either. At 25 years old, I think it's conceivable that within the next few years, Schoolcraft may be giving up his baseball career and maybe going to follow in his name and become a school teacher or something like that. And we've got a new short list of additional players, most of whom are a little more established at the major league level, or we've traded away more recently. Check in on Joe Lewin. He was hurt when we traded him away this year. A guy that we did pick in the first round a few years ago. Hasn't made it out of rookie ball. Was pitching better there this year before he suffered that torn rotator cuff. Definitely concerned about his control and how good his stuff is really going to end up at the major league level. So when we had the opportunity to bring Brian Ramos as well as a couple other potentially useful players down the line on board, as well as a lot of money, we basically sold him and John Rhodes and George Valera to the Philadelphia organization. We'll certainly keep following Lewin. Chris Patterson is a guy who was picked first overall out of Washington in 2031. We saw him this year in the playoffs. In the series, we won the wild card series against the Tampa Bay Rays. He had a nice debut at the major league level this year, 9-6, 353 earned run average. Andres Rojas, the knuckleballer who throws in the mid to high 90s, bounced back from kind of a slow start this year to go 14-13, led the National League in innings pitched and BABIP, 3.61 ERA, 199 strikeouts, gave up more home runs this year, and his WAR was a bit less than it has been over the past couple seasons, but still one of the premier pitchers in all of baseball. Shoji Bame is banged up right now for the Dodgers. Their season is over as they lost their playoff series. International free agent who came over from the Japanese league this past offseason ended up signing a 5-year, $122.5 million deal with the Dodgers. Had a really nice rookie year, although honestly he did tail off a little bit from the midpoint of the season. Finished with a 259 average, 36 homers, and 115 ribbies with a 4.8 WAR. So he was obviously still an incredibly productive player. But you look at his batting splits, and he was a 298, 288, and 293 hitter the first 3 months of the season. 232, 266, and 187 over the last 3 months. And only 4 homers in August and September. So definitely slowed down a bit as major league pitchers maybe have caught up to him a bit. Royce Lewis, another guy who was on our team a year ago that we thought about bringing back when Bame got too expensive. Interestingly, the Dodgers traded him right before the trade deadline to the Brewers. He was much less productive with the Brewers than he was with the Dodgers, was basically a league average offensive player with the Brewers. The Dodgers have all that money, but maybe they kind of figured that $23 million a year for the next 3 years for a guy who's 33 years old may have been even a little bit rich for the Los Angeles organization, so they dealt him away. Galterio Mancina, 24-year-old with Kansas City, was in that first IAFA pool in 2025. Clearly wish we had gone after him. He was certainly on our short list. We went in a different direction. All he did this year, his first full year in the majors, was lead the AL in runs, win a batting title, lead the league in on-base percentage, put up a 7.6 WAR, 43 homers, 135 ribbies, 37 doubles. Mancina certainly looks like he is going to be an incredible offensive player for many years to come. We traded away Arturo Estrada, the number 97 prospect in all of baseball, a couple of months ago when we rented Juan Soto. Love the personality, love the speed, love the range in the outfield. Question with him is the power and the ability to draw walks. He did end up spending some time in A-ball and high A-ball in the Twins organization. Was respectable in A-ball, but when they brought him back up to high A, which is where we had him, certainly struggled in a very small sample size there. And saved the best for last, our old buddy Hidero Endo. And Endo, as you may know or may remember, I believe suffered a broken ankle early this year, which not only fractured his ankle, but fractured his season. But Endo had an absolutely incredible August and September. Played in just 55 games this year, 216 at-bats, and he had a ridiculous 29 homers and 62 ribbies. He still hit just 227, and he still struck out in exactly half of his at-bats in the majors, but the insane home run numbers added up to a 149 WRC plus and a 2.3 WAR in that limited sample size. Guy barely played a third of a season, and he hit 29 home runs. So whether you think the single-season home run king is Babe Ruth or Roger Maris or Aaron Judge or Sammy Sosa or Mark McGwire or Barry Bonds or somebody else, the way Endo played over the third of a season he did play, he would have obliterated every home run record in the history of baseball if he had been able to keep up that pace over a full season. Set to be making about $9 million next year as a 34-year-old with the Tigers organization. And although we're going to wait until next episode before we do our annual roster review and start planning in depth for the off season and next year, given that we've talked about players who we might have in our organization in terms of the IAFA prospects, players who we thought about bringing into our organization years ago, and a few players who once were part of our organization, figured it made sense before we finish this episode to take a look at the actual prospects and the top prospects who are in our farm system right now. With the promotions to the major league level of some pretty significant players over the last season and a half, minor league system is now decidedly middle of the pack in terms of rankings, ranking 18th out of 30. That'll get reset in a few weeks when we get to the off season. Got 3 top 100 prospects, including 2 top 50 prospects. Jesus Saldana, the starting pitcher who was our prime IAFA target this past January, did a pretty good job for us in the DSL. He was 5-2 with a 3.48 ERA, struck out 97 batters in 77 2/3 innings. Did allow a 417 BABIP, so that certainly was not great, but a solid introduction to professional baseball for the now 18-year-old Saldana, who we think could be a pretty significant member of our rotation in a few seasons if he continues to develop. Arturo Uresti, number 34 prospect in baseball, had a really nice year on the DSL team as a 19-year-old also. 18 homers for the second straight year, raised his batting average a bit, on-base percentage close to 500, 150 WRC plus. Not really much left for Uresti to prove at that level. Still looks like he's not quite ready to dominate in the California League in A-ball, but given that he's had 2 dominant seasons at this point in rookie ball, would tend to think that he will be in A-ball as a 19-year-old, soon-to-be 20-year-old next April. And then Shiloh Solis, first-round pick of ours in 2031, the number 87 prospect in baseball. Did a little better in his first full season of rookie ball action. Hit 215, did have 9 doubles and 9 homers. Struck out a lot, was a below average offensive player. The 19-year-old still has a lot of work to do. Like his personality, competent in terms of his range, and still think that bat could ultimately be pretty interesting for a middle infielder, but he's got a lot of work to do to fully develop. And although we just have the 3 top 100 prospects, we do have 5 other prospects ranked in the top 150. Bertrand Albon, a guy that we have thought about trading away on many occasions, international free agent signing from that second IAFA period in 2026. Split this year between high A ball and double A. Didn't have much left to prove in high A, where he had a 116 WRC plus, 13 doubles, 9 homers, and 228 at-bats. It didn't look like he was quite ready for double A ball, but given that he was going to be turning 23 years old in August, figured we'd push him a little bit. Hit 209, 4 doubles, 4 triples, 4 homers, and 129 double-A at-bats, but was overall a below-average offensive player. Still love his personality. He's versatile defensively, although not particularly good. Unfortunately, can't even really play him in a corner outfield spot with that brutal range and arm. Still think he could have interesting-ish home run power with above-average contact. Don't think he's going to ever be a superstar player for us, but he could be a cheap player to layer into this organization, and given our expectation that we're going to continue to have the lowest budget in baseball for the foreseeable future, Albon may still have some value for us down the line. Alejandro Landine, another international free agent signing, spent the entire year in high A ball, hit 269, 20 doubles, 12 homers, and 323 at-bats. 121 WRC plus. He turned 22 a month and a half ago. Looks like he's borderline ready for double A ball next year. Might struggle a little bit out of the gate, but given that he will be approaching his 23rd birthday next year, and he really doesn't have much to prove in A or high A ball, tend to think we'll probably start him in double A. Certainly think with his versatile, competent glove, some great personality traits, and a bat that could be functional at the major league level, he could still be somebody who could help us down the line. Hopefully we'll be able to say the same thing about Luis Coronado, second round pick a year ago. Did not do as well in his first full year of rookie ball action. Hit just a $167 in 311 at-bats. Like his glove, like his speed. The question is how and when that bat will develop. He is already 20 years old, so probably going to need to see some progress next year. ACL, still a guy that's not incredible, and even a little less competent as an A-ball player potentially, but I would think at some point next year he'll be an A-ball. Josh Mangano is a second-round pitcher we picked in 2028 who's moving along quite nicely. Split the year between A, high A, and double A ball. Had winning records at each level, sub-3 ERAs in both A and high A. Even though he was 3-A at the double A level, did allow 56 hits and 8 home runs in 44 and a third innings, so his ERA was not particularly impressive. Would expect he'll be 22 this offseason. Would expect that he'll start the year in double A again, where hopefully we'll get a little more productivity out of him. Hopefully he can continue working on that changeup. Doesn't seem he's quite ready for AAA right now, but the hope might be that he could get to AAA at the end of next year and then be in the mix to be on the major league roster at some point in the 2034 season. And our final top 150 prospect is the right fielder Sergio Palominos. another international amateur free agent signing, made the jump to A-ball this year, hit just a $195, so that's not great, obviously, and he struck out 165 times. But he did have 20 doubles, 6 triples, and 11 home runs while stealing 27 bases. He's definitely a very toolsy player, and it all added up to a WRC plus of 93. So despite the sub-Mendoza line batting average, he wasn't a complete disaster at that level. Taking a look at his ratings, he looks like he should be, better than he was, quite honestly, at the A-ball level. Look at the Midwest League and would think that at some point next year he'll probably get a promotion to high A. Not inconceivable that if things went really well, we could even see him in double A next season as well. Check in on a few other guys who are closer to the major leagues, we hope. Juan Ruiz, who is the guy who was our international free agent signing in 2025, or was our prime IAFA signing in 2025. We've talked about a lot of the guys that we didn't select and the productivity of some of them. Ruiz spent the entire year in Double A, and he was pretty productive. Hit 291, 23 doubles, 23 homers, 129 WRC plus, 4.7 WAR. Turned 24 towards the end of the Double-A season. No questions about his personality. Pretty versatile, albeit not necessarily an exceptional defensive player, given that his range isn't great, but everything else is pretty good. The question with him is really going to be his bat. He is more than competent at the Double-A level. Would think at his age, we'll play him in Triple-A next year. Hopefully we can get him into the development lab this offseason and maybe supercharge a little bit his contact or some of the other areas where we think there's still some room for him to grow. Don't think he's ever going to be a superstar, but think similar to Landine, he could be a guy who could help us at the major league level in the next few years. Pennyman, number 2 overall pick in 2028 as a high school pitcher. Still think he can be a useful major league arm, but he certainly is not going to reach the ceiling we hoped he would have. First full year in Double A this year, 15-8 record with a 4.40 ERA. Did strike out 213 batters, so there's a lot of positives. His ERA plus and his FIP minus were both above average. The negatives are the negatives. We've talked about him for a while. 73 walks and 32 home runs allowed. Last year we weren't able to get him in the development lab in the offseason because he suffered an injury right after being promoted to Double A. Bounced back from that injury this year at 22 years old. It's going to be real important for him to have a successful trip to the development lab this off-season. Would tend to think we'll probably be working on his control, but that is still TBD. Bob Day, a college player that we picked in the 6th round out of Pepperdine. Split the year between Double A and Triple A, was pretty productive at both levels, combined for 28 homers and 93 ribbies between the two levels. Not a dynamic defensive player, not a lot of speed, and quite honestly, not a great bat. But given the turnover that we expect to have on our roster this year, the soon-to-be 25-year-old Bob Day will likely be in the mix to be a first baseman / corner outfield / DH type for us in the majors next season. Sam Bailey, AAA pitcher, guy that we picked in the 4th round out of UNLV just a couple of years ago. Split the year between AA, where he was 8-0 with an incredible 1.14 ERA, and then AAA, where he was 4-9 with a much more pedestrian 4.42 ERA. Gave up a fair amount of home runs and walks at the AAA level, but still looking at his profile, seems like he could be a useful-ish back of the rotation type pitcher for us, or certainly a left-handed arm out of the bullpen in the not too distant future. We'll be talking about Luis Taveras, who's in the majors, in our next episode. Last couple guys who are getting close. Andy Toribio, you may remember we picked him up in a trade with the Giants about a year and a half ago. He's been training as an outfielder this year to increase his versatility, but a very good defensive infielder is really his primary strength. The question is how much he's going to actually hit. Hit 235 in Double-A this year, still promoted him up to Triple-A, and he actually did better there, where he was a 268 hitter, 10 home runs at each level, a bit above average offensively in terms of his WRC plus at Triple-A. I think he could be a very useful utility player for us, whose bat is not embarrassing, like the durability, like some of the personality traits, has decent speed and pretty good instincts on the base paths. So could certainly see Toribio being a useful utility guy for us at a very attractive price point for the next few years. And Jaden Boekai, a catcher. You may remember a few years ago, towards the middle rounds of the draft, we just bought a bunch of catchers who we thought were good value into our organization, and Boekai is probably the biggest success story of any of those. Love the potential defense he has, some positive personality traits, and the bat has developed reasonably. Spent this entire year as our starting catcher in Triple-A, hit 306 with 26 homers, 96 ribbies, 124 WRC plus. Really nothing left for him to prove at the Triple-A level. Just turned 24 yesterday, so happy birthday, Jaden. And given his really good defense and the fact that we think his bat could be competent, he will most likely be in the mix to be a catcher for us next year if we move on from Drake Baldwin particularly. And it's not inconceivable that, again, with that really good defense and a bat that we think can be competent, that Boekai may be a starting catcher for us next year, not just a backup catcher at the major league level. So before we finish up this episode, we're just going to sim ahead a week and a half and find out which of the 4 best teams in baseball are going to be competing in the World Series here in 2032. And the favorites continue to have a relatively easy run in the playoffs. The best team in baseball, the Royals, swept the Yankees in 4 games. So the fact that we pushed the Royals to a deciding 5th game may be a small feather in the cap of the Oakland A's. And they'll be going up against the best team in the National League, the Colorado Rockies, who took out the Pirates in 6 games. So the Royals and the Rockies will be fighting for the 2032 World Series championship. And there were a couple of players posted by the Korean Baseball Organization. Right fielder Jae-won Lee, looking for $16 million. Certainly not something that we would be involved in. Ji-Hyu Wang is actually a pretty interesting looking player. Kodak, the first baseman, looks like his contact and his power are both above average. In the case of power, well above average. A pretty strong hitting first baseman who led the Korean League this year with 31 homers. Also led the league in slugging percentage, OPS, and WRC plus for the 2nd straight year. So a pretty high-end player from the Korean League, given that the posting fee is $25 million. Probably not something realistic for us to consider here in Oakland. And with that, we will call it an episode. Next time around, we will find out who is the World Series champion this year, the Royals or the Rockies. And more importantly for our future in Oakland, we will find out Whether or not we have a job at the end of this season, given that we just got a 2-year extension last year and we did guide the team into the playoffs, even though our ownership evaluation is unlikely to be great this year, given that we struggled in extra inning games and we did not win the championship. Certainly expecting that we will keep our job. But the big thing in the next episode, in addition to finding that out, as well as finding out who the World Series champion is to do our annual deep dive on our roster at the major league level and start talking through who's going to be back and who's not going to be back. And unfortunately, there's a lot of guys who aren't going to be back, and our A's are going to look very different in 2033 than they do here at the end of the 2032 season. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.